with failures. Because in the medical community, in the alternative healing community, we have failures all the time. And I thought I'd start with Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright was the subject of a 1957 presidential address for advanced diagnostics. And Mr. Wright had a rare form of lymphoma, and it was so advanced that basically the medical community told him, there's nothing more we can do for you, you get to sit in this hospital bed and die. And Mr. Wright really wasn't one of those individuals that took no for an answer, so he did his own research, he found a cancer study, and he went to his physician to ask about this cancer study, and he said that he was ineligible. Because according to the medical study, you had to be treatable in order to be part of the study. And he just kept asking and asking and ultimately begging and pleading until they included him in this cancer study, and they gave everybody the injections and they went home. And pretty much everyone in the study expected Mr. Wright to be dead before Monday, so he wouldn't even get to do the follow-up test. He was that ill. Well, the following Monday, and they tested all of the patients that had received this injection, and the only one that had received any benefit at all was Mr. Wright. As a matter of fact, his results were so profound, there really wasn't a medical explanation for what had occurred. His tumors had shrunk down like snowballs on a griddle. It just went, and his symptoms went away, and his health improved to the point where they had to send him home. There just was no reason to keep him. And he went home and he went back to work and he flew his airplane up to 12,000 feet and there was no pain whatsoever, and he just went on with his life. And a couple of months later, he was reading in the newspaper that this cancer study that they had done had proved to be not as good as that they had expected it to. And Mr. Wright's symptoms returned and his tumors came back. And he went back to his doctor, and his doctor told him that we have this new medication. And the doctor did for the first time that he had ever done this, he lied to a patient. And he gave Mr. Wright an injection of sterile water and sent him home. And the exact same thing happened. Mr. Wright's tumors shrunk, his symptoms went away. About a year later, he was watching a thing on the news, and they had announced this cancer study had been a complete washout. This time, when Mr. Wright's symptoms returned, he died within 72 hours. Nothing could reconvert his mind or convince him into a place of faith, of hope, or possibility. And whenever I think about that story, I wonder if Mr. Wright had been out walking his dog or doing something other than watching the television and never knew that this cancer study was a failure, would he have just kept right on living? And this is the topic that I want to talk about, is that the mind-body connection is more than just us talking to our doctors and going to our personal trainers and working out and eating organic food. That our bodies communicate with us every single day. And I have people in my office every single day, and the reason that they come into my office generally isn't the reason that they come in. For example, when amoebas have a plentiful food supply, they float around like single-cell animals. When the food supplies are scarce, the amoebas clump together, their molecular configuration changes, and they form into a flatworm. And science has no idea how they do that. When food is plentiful, they split back apart and become single-cell animals again. Animals and humans do the same thing. We clump together when we're cold. We split apart when we're angry. We clump together when we're frightened. And when everything's fine, we roam far and wide. So what I want to talk about today is how to access this mind-body connection of how to speak to our body. And unless you speak fluent liver or you speak fluent cold and flu, I want you guys to understand that a lot of what we're going to be talking about is metaphorical. And some of it you're going to go, yeah, I don't know about that. Another one it's just going to be right on. I had a lady who came into my office, and she had crushed her finger in a car door. And she just about chopped that little guy off. And she came into the office, and she's got this finger with this black thing right on the end of it. And she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, well, the first thing you need to do is apologize to your finger. Because it's obvious that that finger had to stick itself in the door to get your attention. So you might want to ask what the message is. And she went into trance for a couple of minutes and came back out. And then she proceeded to tell me that a friend of hers who has been trying to get her to teach massage therapy classes for people that have breast cancer. And she has been resisting that. And she decided she wanted to be a yoga instructor. And she went to yoga class and took the practical and was all the way down to the final exam when this accident happened. And now it's going to be more than a year before she can put any weight on that finger. And so I told her to thank her finger for giving that information, and I sent her away, and she was going to come back in a week. And I said, make sure that you talk to your finger every day. And she looked at me like I was nuts. But she did it anyway. She calls me like a week later and goes, you'd never believe this. My friend called me back, and they really want me to teach this massage therapy class for breast cancer patients, and they're going to pay me full time. They're going to pay me $150 an hour, which is twice as much as that she would have ever made as a yoga instructor. So the messages that are being sent out by our mind and our body, our cells, are actually there if you're willing to listen. The three mechanisms that I want to talk about today are faith and placebo, and of course my favorite, hypnosis. Okay? Faith is a really interesting concept. It boils down to belief. What you believe is possible is possible. What you believe is impossible for you. Okay, let's do a show of hands. How many people believe that when they get up in the morning that the floor is going to be there? We'll start with simple, okay? Keep your hands up and just drop them down when I hit something that you don't believe, okay? How many people believe that they can heal from a cold or a flu? Okay? How many people believe that they can heal from a cut or a burn? How many people believe that they can heal from cancer? How many people believe that they can heal from HIV? How many people believe that they could grow a new finger or a tooth? Why not? It's just a belief. It is amazing what people can accomplish with a belief. And one of my favorite forms of belief is the next category, which is prayer. Does anybody in here pray? Okay. Do you pray in your head or do you pray out loud? Okay. Most people do not know that the human voice has a 40% overlap on the neural cortex of the brain. That means that what you say and how you say it affects your physiology. So you might want to pay attention to what you say and how you say it. You also might want to pay attention to who you're around and what they say. Because everybody's got one of those relatives that you really hate going to Thanksgiving dinner because you know they're going to be there. Okay, so having that ability to have that tonality affect our physiology is something that we need to pay attention to. And if you really want your prayers to be effective, I recommend that you do them out loud. The University of Maryland just released a study. They reviewed 23 independent studies about prayer, and they found that people who were going into surgery that had people praying for them, they had better surgical procedures, they had fewer post-operative problems, they healed faster than people who weren't being prayed for in surgery. So almost everybody knows about a prayer list. If you have a surgery schedule, get on the prayer list. If somebody says they want to pray for you, say thank you. The second mechanism for the mind-body connection is something that probably everybody knows about, but they may or may not have made that connection. It's called placebo. And everybody knows I'm talking about little sugar pills, right? Okay. Placebo is an amazing thing. Medical science knows more about placebos than they do any other medication. And the reason that they know that is because they test every single medication against a placebo. 55% of all people who take medication receive the benefit of that medication through the placebo effect. Okay, so when I have clients that come into my office and they are injured, or they are very ill, or they are stopping smoking, or stopping drinking, or whatever else that they want to stop doing, I tell them to have one almond 4 times a day. And the act of taking that almond, putting it in their mouth, reestablishes that intention for them to heal. And I know that them eating 4 almonds a day won't hurt them, and then there's a 55% chance that it will actually speed their recovery. The third mechanism for the mind-body connection is my personal favorite, which is hypnosis, because, you know, that's what I do. Hypnosis is, I didn't bring in, do you have a pen?
We can get one.
Okay. I only need it for like 10 seconds.
And I'll put our person right there.
So while we're waiting, am I talking too fast? Because I'm like really nervous. Do I look like it?
Yeah.
I'm in a room full of girls. Okay. If you think that hypnosis is where somebody takes their pen and waves it and says, you are getting blah, 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 and then I give you some instructions and then you walk off and go do them, I can tell you absolutely there's no such thing as hypnosis. If you believe that hypnosis is a way to learn something new or learn something interesting about yourself or access a part of yourself that isn't normally available consciously, then I can tell you that there absolutely is a thing called hypnosis. Hypnosis is a very procedural method for bypassing the critical or conscious mind to access the autonomic functions, which is the scientific explanation for I get to see miracles every day that I go to work. I'm not supposed to, but I have a 5-year-old. Okay, oops. Okay, and when she was about 2 years old, I was sitting at home, you know, I'm supposed to be watching her, but I'm working on my laptop. Okay, and she's running back and forth, and back into her bedroom, and then she comes back in the living room, plays with her little toys, and then she goes back in, and I'm just like timing her. And it's about 3, 2, 1, and off she goes again. And more and longer, I'm noticing that she's staying gone, and I get really curious. And I'm just about to get up to go get her. And only this time she comes back. Only this time she's naked and she's carrying a spatula. Okay? So what can we deduce from this? We know she's up to something. We just don't know what it is yet. So when I have people come into my office, that is the same mindset that I prefer to have is, we know they're up to something, and whatever it is that is bringing them in the office, whether it's headaches or it's insomnia or they've got fears or phobias or whatever it is, that's what their conscious mind thinks is the problem. I had a lady come into my office in November. In November, I always do some type of a charity thing. I did a can drive for a food pantry, and I did 57 hypnosis sessions for people, and all they had to do is bring 5 cans of food. I had food stacked up in my office. So this lady comes in, and she goes, I've been grinding my teeth. And I'm like, okay. And we go through the process, and she goes into trance. And I asked her to access the part of her that was clamping her jaw shut so tightly it was breaking her teeth. And she quiet for about 20 minutes, and the reality is she didn't budge at all for about 20 minutes. It's kind of creepy if you've never seen it before. She comes out of trance and goes, I never would have guessed that. You know, and I'm curious. Well, guess what? And she told me that when she was 6 years old, she had this favorite cousin, and this cousin moved away to Pennsylvania. While his parents were unpacking the house, he was playing out in the yard and playing in a snow fort, and the snow fort caved in, and he died. And she told me that, you know, in the 60s, that 6-year-old kids were just not allowed to talk about dead relatives, particularly little children. And her unconscious mind interpreted that message, that she was supposed to keep her mouth shut. And it did for 30 years. And it kept it shut so well that she went to this class and she went to that dentist and she read this book and she was breaking her teeth. She even crushed a dental appliance, which I'm thinking, That's amazing how much jaw strength you must have to do that. But when she came out of trance and she had this information consciously that she had never grieved the loss of her cousin, I asked her if it was okay for her to let go. And, you know, there were obviously tears and stuff. And I got a phone call from her a couple of days later. No more teeth grinding. I got an email from her about 2 months ago that her headaches are gone, her TMJ is gone, she's no longer taking medication for migraines. All of these little things were just one simple interpretation of her unconscious mind, an instruction given to a child with no additional explanation. The one that I found that was really interesting was during the same period of time in November, I had a guy come in and he wanted to stop smoking. And has anybody ever in here ever been to a hypnotist? Was it a group thing or was it an individual thing? Did you actually go into trance or not?
It didn't work.
That I was going to say, there's probably somebody in here that go, yeah, we did that, it didn't work. Would you like to know why it didn't work? The reason that you did not go into trance is the one that you were in was far more interesting than the one the guy was offering you. So this guy's sitting in my office and he's trying to relax and he's trying to do this and it's just like nothing's happening. And I'm like, I got an idea. Is there anything that your unconscious mind would prefer to work on rather than you stopping smoking? Bam, he's got an answer. He's like, yeah, I'd like to work on my MS. I'm like, you didn't mention that when you came in. Yeah. And the reason he didn't mention it is because he didn't know that hypnosis can work with lots of different autoimmune disorders. And so he goes into trance and he comes back out and he goes, that's exactly what I thought. And I hate it when people do that because I'm not in their head. So I go, okay, more. And he had been diagnosed with MS, but he didn't feel like it was his disease. And trance revealed that he felt really, really guilty of the fact that his mother had died of MS. And there wasn't really anything that he could do except just be with her. And his guilt was manifesting these symptoms. So we worked on him for a couple of sessions and he was able to let go of that feeling. He goes back to the doctor. He doesn't have MS. He still hasn't come back to stop smoking, but he doesn't have MS. It's just, it's amazing to me that how our minds interpret information. I'll tell the story on me. I'm a big guy, but I always used to carry like an extra 15 or 20 pounds. And when I was going through my doctoral program, I decided to find out what that was all about, and I put myself into trance, and I got the information that when I was in second grade, I left my lunch money at home. Sounds stupid, doesn't it? I got the unique experience that most Americans never have, is I got to spend an entire day without food. And my unconscious mind went, oh no, we are not doing that anymore. So I can remember, my mom's like, clean off the table. I'm like, eating all the way to the refrigerator. And ever since I got that information, it is much easier for me to just go, I'm done. And that 20 pounds just fell off. I didn't have to diet, I didn't have to work out, it just went away. So what I wanted to tell you guys about, it isn't that you need to pray and eat almonds and do hypnosis. What I wanted you guys to come away from this conversation is that there is an entire world of communication that is going on with your body. And we are all getting older, we're all not 21 in here. And the messages that we have been given as children and the experiences that we have, sometimes those manifest into illness and dis-ease and different types of symptoms. My very last story, and then I'm going to let you guys go, is my absolute favorite. Bob is a mammoth hunter. This was like a really long time ago. Bob is a mammoth hunter, and he's a really good mammoth hunter. And one day he's out hunting with the tribe, and he gets gored by a woolly rhinoceros, and this wound is huge. It's absolutely huge. And they're worried that Bob isn't going to survive. But Bob's fit, Bob's strong, and he starts to heal. But unbeknownst to Bob, there's a bigger wound. It's a large wound, and unfortunately for Bob, it's invisible. And the reason that it's invisible is Bob is part of a tribe. And the tribe depends on one another, and what everybody collectively hunts and gathers, they share equally with the tribe. And now Bob can't hunt anymore, and Bob and his family could possibly starve if they don't participate. The survivability of the tribe could be affected because Bob is a really great hunter. Now, lucky for them, their shaman is a very wise man, and he's seen this thing before. You know, so he sends out a bunch of emails, does the icon thing, and they are going to have this big festival. So they contact all of the people, and they all make this special meal that they have at times like this. And they make a special drink that everybody's supposed to drink, and it helps them like be more aware of the spiritual world. And they have this meal, and they have their drinks, and they start drumming and drumming, and people are swaying back and forth. And the shaman is opening up a spiritual space that is wide enough for the entire tribe to stand on the edges of this spiritual space while Bob sits in the center of it. And the entire tribe absorbs and heals this wound. Now, after the ceremony, Bob gets this great idea. He goes, hey, I make great spears and arrows. And it's true. I mean, it's not uncommon for people to go to Bob and say, would you make me some arrows and a spear for this special event? And now Bob has almost unlimited time to make spears and arrows. So he gets busy, and he makes lots of spears and lots of arrows. So many that the other hunters, they don't have to make spears and arrows anymore. They have more time to hunt. And because they have more time to hunt, there's a surplus of meat that they can share with Bob and his family. But there's also a large enough surplus that they can actually trade this meat to the other tribes for different medicines and beads and other types of items. And ultimately, this wound has become a resource. This wound has become a resource, and it's become the best resource that Bob and his tribe have ever had. And that's kind of the message that I wanted to present today, is I have people that come to me and they have issues and they have problems and they have illness and they have disease and they have these wounds. They have these great big wounds. And sometimes those wounds affect their whole families. And somehow, either through telling stories and working with people and really, really teaching people to listen, that we're able to transfer those wounds into gifts, into resources that they can share with themselves and their family and their community and the world. Because really, we're just one big tribe. Thank you.